Okay, everybody, welcome to Business Talk After Hours. I'm Mitch Beinhacker, your host. I am a business attorney in Clark, New Jersey, and the host of the Accidental Entrepreneur Business Podcast. I have my colleagues joining us, Michael Manella and Trevor Anderson. Unfortunately, our fourth colleague, Jeff Brenner, has some personal issues. We wish him well. Hope everything's good with him and his family. Mike, why don't you introduce yourself? Trevor, introduce yourself, and then we'll bring today's guest on.
Sounds great. Good morning, everyone. Michael Manella, Wealth Advisor with Merrill Lynch. What I do is help clients prepare for all life's events in a financial planning process. Welcome.
Trevor?
Hey, everybody. So I'm Trevor Anderson. I own TRJ Consulting Services. We are an outside part-time CFO and COO advisory firm. We work with small businesses and startups to help them navigate the troubled waters and maximize profit.
Okay, and our guest today is Ken Winkler. Ken is a guest of Trevor, so Trevor will be our moderator. And Ken Winkler is a 20-plus year veteran of the ESU in New York, former NYPD detective and undercover narcotics officer. He was one of the first responders with 9/11, a true American hero, as well as veteran in the private security space with multiple engagements. And this all led to his most current role as the GM of the Manhattan and Brooklyn Cruise Terminal. I want to welcome Ken to the show. Let's bring him in out of the waiting room. There he is. Ken, good morning, and thank you for joining us on Business Talk. And
morning, guys. Thank you for having me.
I gave you a little bit of an intro, but maybe you want to introduce yourself and then take it away, Trevor.
Perfect.
Sure. My name is Ken Winkler. I work for Ports America. I am the general manager for the Manhattan and Brooklyn Cruise Terminals. I've been with Ports America 13 years. Prior to that, I was in 21 years in the NYPD. I retired in November of 2002 from the Emergency Services Unit as a detective. I then became involved in private security, and at the time, the federal regulations requiring security at cruise terminals was taking a little stronger emphasis on that, and Ports America at the time, P&O Ports, brought me on board as a consultant and as their facility security officer, and that was in about 2003. So since 2003, I've been working within the cruise industry.
Great.
Okay.
Well, again, thanks for coming on, Ken. So I've had the fortunate working with Ken when I was at Ports America years ago. Stand-up guy, and I think for today's conversation, I really want to talk about the importance of collaboration. And I use the word finance, but I'm going to use it broadly as administration and operations combined. So Ken's had a unique experience, both, here in New York, but as well as the other cruise operations with Ports America. And I really want to open it up to us as a panel and Ken to answer some questions and as he sees the value of the partnership. I think when I first came on, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ken, there was a lot of, back and forth, emails. People didn't really necessarily know what was going on with regards to finance and operations at the local levels. And that was part of the things that I really worked to help on with you specifically. So I think for me, Ken, if you could talk a little bit about kind of that partnership we had, but then also I think along the way, Mitch and Mike will have, other questions along that.
Absolutely. So I'm going to use a baseball analogy since we are into the postseason and the Yankees did win last night. So whether we're watching it or not, it's always an exciting time of the year. And in order to be a good team, good baseball team, it was saying that you had to be strong up the middle, right? You have your strengths, you have your weaknesses. When you're strong up the middle, then you have a solid foundation. And that's the same for operations. In order to be strong up the middle, I mean, we know with operations, we know that's where for lack of a better phrase, the rubber meets the road. That's where we make our money. That's where we lose our money. Without operations, we really don't need a finance team, right? We have nothing to oversee. So when you look at operations, a good operations team has the support of finance, it has the support of IT, HR, safety, engineering, and that's your middle, right? That's where your strength is. I don't like the term back office or back of the house. In a lot of places they consider those those business components back of the house, and they're really not. They need to be part of the operation. They don't have to know the operation. They don't have to come in on weekends. They don't have to work in the rain and the snow. They have to know what the guys do. We need that support. When we have a successful middle, we have a successful support team, we have a successful operation. And it means we have a happy customer, we have a happy management, we have a happy senior management, and so on and so forth. And that's what leads to success, in my opinion.
So Ken, at Ports America, who's basically the client of the terminal? Is it the cruise ships, or is it like who's coming in there?
Well, our main client are the cruise lines, right? But then we have our customer's customer, which are the passengers. Right? So if the passengers aren't happy, then the cruise line isn't happy. We work on behalf of we have a long-term operating agreement with the City of New York. So the City of New York is our customer. And then we have events, et cetera, that are our customers. So, it extends out. So the person who saved, for years to go on, this lifetime cruise, a lifetime family vacation is our customer. Even though they're not paying us and the cruise lines are paying us, they're our customer. So if they're happy, then the cruise line is happy. If the cruise lines are happy, then we should be happy, and so on and so forth. So it's not just our direct customer, it's our customer's customer that we have to focus on as well.
And Ports America is a private company, right?
Ports America cruise is one part of it. We service container ships, or what they call ro-ro ships that vehicles and break bulk type vessels, things like that across the country.
With the big container boxes on them, right?
Yes. My focus is on cruise. The boxes don't talk back. Passengers do talk back. Boxes never complain. Passengers do complain.
Right.
They'll complain about the weather, but we understand that.
Right.
So we want to look at it as if, how would your family want to be treated if they were going on this vacation? And that's something that we try to convey and transcend through the labor workforce. Everything from security to the actual folks that are receiving the bags and loading the bags, that it's a customer service mentality, and it's an operational mentality, because you have to get the ships out on time. They have to be done. It has to be done safely. The time is money,
right? Yeah, well, that's why I think Trevor brought you on to talk about operations. I mean, running a port, the logistics of it must be unbelievable. And you're only on the east side of the river. Does Ports America also operate on the Jersey side, out of Bayonne and those areas?
Well, we're not on cruise. We are on the Jersey side, on the container side, and on the ro-ro side, some break bulk work. But cruise, we do cruise in New York, Brooklyn. We do cruise in Charleston. We do cruise in Boston. We have JVs in Miami. And we also do cruise in LA and Seattle. Oh,
so you're up and down the east and the west coast.
Yes.
Okay, but you run the ports in, Manhattan and Brooklyn?
Manhattan and Brooklyn. Pre-COVID, this was supposed to be a banner year for us.
Right.
We expected about a 200,000 passenger increase from 2019, pushing about 1.3, 1.4 million passengers through the terminals.
Right. How many people do you have working under you in all these different departments?
Well, within the Ports America management team, it's a small team. You have 5 or 6 people.
Oh.
But you're managing a very large labor force. You're managing the union, International Longshoremen Association. You're managing the security. You're managing the parking. And you're also responsible for the contractors that are retained, such as the check-in agents by the cruise lines. So anybody who steps foot on this facility.
Right. Yeah. So you're okay. So you have union employees,
yes,
right, through all these unions, and you have basically subcontractors that are contracted out services from different companies that deal with, and you lease the ports from the city.
We have a long-term lease agreement that we secured in 2017 from the City of New York. And in Brooklyn, we have a long-term operating agreement. They run consecutively with each other. So we're here for the long haul, 25 years. So we've been operating cruise as an operator in New York and Manhattan since the late 90s. So we do have a lot of experience. A lot of places, there's a separation. There's a separation between the terminal operator where he's just responsible for, say, stevedoring, the loading and the unloading of the ship.
Okay.
Someone else may be responsible for security, and someone else may be responsible for the wear and tear on the facility. Well, we have all of that. Everything from, fixing multi-million-dollar DOAs for passenger boarding to fixing, cracks in the sidewalk, to fixing toilets. So it's a turnkey operation.
Right. Basically a triple net lease, right? You're responsible for everything.
We are responsible for absolutely everything that happens on this terminal. 100%, yes.
Right.
Good or bad.
Right. I've seen a lot, though, since the 90s, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, with this pandemic, I mean, what a shift in regards to a lot of industries. And we're having a lot of talks, about this almost every other day, about, businesses that are, expanding, and as well as businesses are really hurting quite a bit, from this. So being that you work with a lot with cruise lines in particular, what is your outlook with the cruise line industry going forward at this point?
We're engaged with the cruise line, through myself, through our senior sales folks that are directly involved with the folks in Miami and the folks out on the West Coast. It's a lot of wait and see. We don't know what CDC is going to require. Today, actually, the CDC no sail order expires today. Just some stuff from local media is kind of indicating they may extend that for another month, which basically the way it works is with the no sail order, the cruise lines are looking to ramp up 30 days after the no sail order. So for instance, the no sail order that was in effect through September 30th, if it did expire and the CDC was allowing cruise ships to enter into service again, they need about 30 days to ramp up. They're in various stages of what they call layup, hot layup, cold layup, etc. Where cold layup taking the longest. They dock throughout the Caribbean and places in Europe, where on the West Coast, where the ships are maintained by a skeleton crew, a crew that meets the Coast Guard requirements. So in order to ramp up, if they do extend this to October, we probably will not see cruise ship activity until December. And then it's going to be a slow start. It's going to be very similar to what's happened in the tri-state area with the various phases, with the first phase being
Sure.
the most restrictive.
Right.
Yep.
So what we're looking at is, where do we need to be when they open? What do we need to do? Is it everything from, touchless facilities in the restrooms? Do we need plexiglass? Do we don't want to go out there and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on something that you may not need? So if they change their operation, their check-in procedures, we'll be in touch with them. It may not be plexiglass, it may be just more masks, right?
Yep.
So that's kind of where we're trying to feel out. We do believe that cruises will be at a reduced capacity. They will be looking to go to places where they can do shorter cruises. So typically in New York, this time of year, November, December, January into the beginning of February, are longer, 10 to 14-day cruises. I don't know if that's something on the horizon right now. Again, the longer the folks are on the ship, the bigger issue they have. Cruise lines have to get the blessing of their local port authorities, the local city government, because the big concern is when they do have a guest, whether it's a guest or a crew member, that does test positive, they want to be able to ensure that they can discharge that person, into a proper healthcare facility, that they won't be turned away. And those are some of the things that happened early on. If you recall, they were being turned away from ports. So if you're doing a 7-8 day cruise, you're in the Caribbean, and you have a guest 3 or 4 days, or crew member 3 or 4 days into the into the cruise that tests positive, well, can they discharge that that person on that island, or do they have to come back to New York? Or do they have to come back to Miami or LA? So
Isn't that what happened out of Washington, right? They wouldn't let the ship dock, right?
That's what happened. So, so it's a step. So, you need to get that reassurance from the various ports for one. And then there's going to be a very, very stringent testing procedure for crew members from the time they leave their home country to the time they're actually able to engage with passengers. There'll be a reduced number of passengers. It won't be the cruising that we all experienced, those of us who have experienced it over the years, but it will get there. It'll just get there in faces.
Well, Ken, even when they open it up slowly, it doesn't mean people are going to jump on a ship just because it's available, right? I mean, restaurants are the same problem. People aren't going to rush out because they're still nervous. I mean,
there's a comfort level that people have to have, and there's a certain demographic, and there are certain cruise lines that cater to a certain demographic that tend to be older folks, and these folks are going to have to.
And they're the most at risk.
They're the most at risk, and they're going to have to get some type of sign off from a personal physician.
Right.
It's going to be rapid testing. Rapid testing is the key. And when you
it's very inaccurate. Right.
Same thing with flying. If you want to get on a plane, then why can you not have a rapid test, whether it's within 48 hours or 24 hours of flying,
right?
As opposed to being quarantined for 14 days, things like that. So we'll see that, and it may be at a point where rapid testing day of going on the ship and continuous rapid testing of crew members. And and we'll get to a point where restrictions will be reduced.
Well, hopefully, eventually, we have a vaccine, and people can say they've been vaccinated.
Have a vaccine. It's again, people will be signing health forms, and we have a flu shot, right? Not everybody gets the flu shot.
Yeah, exactly.
But it doesn't stop you from cruising that you haven't had a flu shot.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. I think that's a great point too with the rapid testing, and ultimately it's starting somewhere and building that comfort level, right? As it opens up over time, you'll build maybe slowly, but build that comfort level. But it's a matter of starting somewhere. And I think rapid test is a great point.
Restaurants open today at 25% capacity
in New York
City today. So folks have been, dying to go out and eat out, and myself, my wife. But we have that comfort level where we want to sit.
Right. Doesn't mean you're rushing there, waiting online to get into the restaurant.
Right. And we're seeing the ships in Europe that are able to sail at 70-75%, still at 50% capacity.
Right. They're up to 70-75% already, huh?
Allowable, but
allowable.
They're not meeting the 70%. They're only getting 50% of the ship.
Right. Well, the ships have dealt with this stuff before, MRSA, norovirus, all that type of stuff. They got Purell all over the ship, but this is a little bit more deadly.
It is, and a lot of the procedures that were in place did kick in. However, there are, what you read the recommendations, you'll see more medical staff on board. You'll see more isolation cabins on board.
Right.
As opposed to somebody being sick and maybe being sent back to their cabin. Maybe they're going to be sent to a different cabin, and where they'll quarantine in that cabin. Where if they test positive, they'll be evacuated from the ship at the first chance, the first port that they can. Where when you were dealing with norovirus, et cetera, you're kind of like, okay, you go back to your cabin and try to reduce the spread. But typically, when we see a lot of norovirus cases, it does tend to be more common on ships that are sailing with older guests.
Right.
You don't really see it during the peak season when we have a lot of children on board and families on board. It seems to affect the older type ships a little bit more, older folks a little bit more than it does the younger kids.
Ken, you said something interesting a little bit before when we were talking about, evaluating different things and safety calls and procedures about investing in plexiglass versus masks. And obviously it's hard to put a plan together depending on how things open up and what happens. But one of the things that I think you talked about, I think it's very interesting because I got to see it, with regards to how those operations work, Mitch and Mike, and regarding the amount of leadership there and the team being small. As Ken mentioned, there's a handful of people, and you have a fully functioning terminal from events, trade shows, movie shoots. You have millions of people coming through the facility, high foot traffic, and think of just understanding the management and the logistics of it. And then you have to say, oh yeah, by the way, we have to understand the cost mechanism as well. And I think it's one of the most difficult things to evaluate in especially in Ken's business, because he's right. Boxes don't talk back. People talk back, right? And you have a customer who says, hey, you dropped my bag in Connolly Station up there in Boston, we're going to send divers in the water, right? I mean, that just goes to show you a little bit more about how this business works. And I think it's very intricate to make sure that they're connected. That's one of the things I tried to spend a lot of time in understanding. And, I think you guys, for the audience listening, this is something very unique. It's a very unique business model, number one. So, Ken, I'd love for you to kind of talk a little bit about maybe on the customer service side, because I think it's really important, because you do a very good job of it.
Well, again, customer service is really one of the most important things that we do. Aside from within the operations, we want guests to have a pleasant experience. Right? Nobody wants to turn a guest away. Nobody wants to, drop a bag in the water. Does it happen? It does happen. And one bag in the water is one too many bags in the water. One punctuality.
Especially if it's your bag.
Especially if it's your bag, right? So you try to minimize it. It's very similar to basically what's going on with the COVID. You're never going to be able to eliminate it, but you want to minimize it, and you don't want to walk away from it. You don't want to hide it. When it does happen, you fill out the necessary paperwork, you notify the necessary personnel on board the ship agent, so that the guest is not surprised when this happens. So customer service is important, and and the challenging part of anybody's vacation, particularly if you've ever traveled with young children, is getting to the airport, getting to the ship, coming off the plane. Those are the most stressful times in a vacation.
Yep.
Right. Especially if you're traveling with kids, right?
You lose a kid, lose a bag. You're like, well, what happened to Johnny?
We've seen people where a whole family, one person has forgotten a passport. And they wouldn't let that person sail. We actually were able to, we had a woman, she was like the grandmother, and it was like 40 something people, and they were from Arizona, and she didn't have her passport, and she was not going to be allowed to sail.
Right.
But we were able to, with FaceTime, to get the neighbor into her house so she could go around and find a copy of that passport. And then this was an older woman with an older friend, so it was a little bit challenging on the FaceTime, etc. To get a copy, fax the copy to us in order to allow that guest to sail.
And she didn't need an original passport with her?
No, because they accepted the photocopy of it.
Wow. I had a friend who was getting on a ship with his wife and his kids, and one of the kids somehow got into her passport with a marker, a Sharpie marker, and defaced the whole thing, and they couldn't go.
Right. So, and you don't want to see that. And when the last ship sailed around March 16th, so we did have guests prior to that, beginning of March, that were sailing, and that's when we started doing temperature testing. And we did have families that could not sail.
Right.
So that's not something we want to do. And to Trevor's point about customer service, our customer's customer here is our customer as well. So the more passengers we have here, the more money we make here. And I try to have my team take ownership. I tell them to act like you own it, act like it's your money that we're spending. And I think they appreciate that, because some people feel like, well, you're a big company, you have lots of money, you can just waste money. Well, we can't waste money. Everything is monitored.
Ken, is Ports America a privately owned company, or is it a public company?
No, it's private.
Private, okay.
And when you're successful, you'll seek that benefit. When you're able to get 95+% of your allotted bonus, that's a successful year, and that's what people appreciate. We all want to be part of a winning team. Nobody wants to be part of a 500 team. Half of the major league teams this year made the playoffs, the other half didn't. What do you want to be? You want to be on the playoffs, or you want to be watching from your television? And that's what we want to be. We don't want to be watching from a television. We want to be in the game. We want to be one of the top terminals in the country.
Ken, I was wondering, since we're talking about operations and, Trevor understands this better than I do, but I would assume prior to things like COVID, you had, standard operating procedures. Everybody knew what their job was. They're coordinating everything. People come. This is how it goes. This must be a daily change to what you're doing, because I know the rules change. They come down with new rulings. They change this. Like you said, there's a no sale order. Now it may be extended. How do you deal with that operationally with your team, with all the constant unknowns and changes that are going on?
Well, we're actually in the same position as the cruise lines, because they're not really sure what they're doing either.
Right.
They've submitted their list of enhanced procedures to CDC, and so everything is subject to change. So this is very similar to what happened within the industry after 9/11. After 9/11, everybody was selling something to protect themselves.
Right. Sure.
There was a lot of what we call the 9/12 security companies out there who, were everything from, itemizers to you name it, right?
Yeah.
And you had to shake it out. What worked, what didn't work. We can't afford to waste money. And that's very similar. I could go out and buy $100,000 worth of plexiglass, put signs all over the place, and then find out that the whole check-in procedure has been changed, and I no longer need the plexiglass. So we're cautious with that. And that's where...
So, Ken, you're submitting your proposed procedures to the CDC, and so are the cruise lines, or they're coming back to you?
The cruise lines have submitted. There was a question, a request for information, sort of a request for comment.
Okay.
CDC had put out. So within the trade organization and the cruise lines, everybody had submitted some type of request for information, et cetera. So the CDC now has that, and the CDC will digest that, and they'll respond back to them.
Right.
The CDC may turn around and say, well, we want every piece of luggage sprayed before it goes on board the ship.
Right.
Okay.
But logistically, is that possible?
Well,
possible?
If you want to be in the game, you have to find a way to make it possible.
Right.
These are things that we're thinking of. We're thinking about all the what ifs.
Yeah, so adapted to it.
We don't want to waste money now, so we're not going to foolishly waste money.
Right.
We think it'll start in Florida, and then we'll be able to learn from their best practices, et cetera.
But Ken, a lot of these operational rules come down and they don't really understand your business or your business model, and it may be difficult to implement, right?
It may be very difficult to implement. And here, with whatever CDC and the cruise line agree to, it still has to pass the governor's office and the mayor's.
Right.
So when we look at, an example would be the cruise industry, cruise starting up in Florida. And we still have a 14-day quarantine for anybody traveling from Florida. So if you decide to fly to Florida to go on a cruise for Thanksgiving, you better be prepared to come back to New York and quarantine for you and your family for 14 days.
Right.
Right. That's restricted. California, you could fly to California and fly back, not have that same restriction. So these are things that people have to look at. While New York City has a low positivity rate right now, it may be a more ideal candidate for cruising,
right.
The drop-off market, et cetera. The issue is, where can you go from here? Canada is kind of closed. Canada's closed to cruise.
Yeah, right, to us. Right.
Anyway. Bermuda basically closes, by the end of October to cruise. So you have the Bahamas, and the Bahamas is not accepting cruise ships right now.
Ah, okay.
So you have to look like, where can you go and where can you get back from?
Right. And things are spiking different places too. They're starting to rise again.
You may be able to ramp up now and then have a spike. There are spikes in certain parts of New York City right now where they shut you down.
Yeah.
I kind of feel that as long as Broadway is closed, New Year's Eve celebrations can cancel.
Yeah, they ain't happening. Right.
I don't think you're going to see, whether even if it's 1,000 people being permitted to go on to a cruise ship.
Yeah, I've heard on Broadway they're scheduling March shows if things stay status quo, but who knows, right?
Exactly. So the reality of it is, we do have cruises on the calendar that are still on sale for November, December, January. So we plan on being ready before a November call.
Right.
Personally, I'd be very surprised to see that.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I'd be comfortable being on I mean, I wasn't comfortable when we were on the ship and they were making us use Purell, getting on the ship, off the ship, in the dining room, to be worried about that kind of stuff that you can't even see, and wear masks on the ship. And I don't know.
Cruise
Those are
bookings for
vaccines.
21 are strong.
Yeah. Late in the year.
A lot of that are folks that rebooked their cruise from 2020.
Right.
They had incentives, basically they were giving you 125% value of your cruise.
Right.
So, and with still being able to cancel should.
Yeah, a lot of them couldn't. A lot of them had insurance that had pandemic exclusions, and they would give them a credit, but then we'll give them the money back, so they got to book the cruise anyway.
Got to book it anyway. And so they look at that. They look at the rebooks versus new books, and people do feel that, hey, I'll take the shot. The vaccine will be out. I'll take. Listen, I know people that have been to Miami. People are on the beach.
Yeah, no, Miami's all open. Look, if you're not afraid of this stuff, you get great deals right now.
Great deal right now.
Right.
You're going to get a great deal.
You can have a ship to yourself.
And if you are afraid, then don't go.
Yeah.
What's forcing you to go?
Absolutely.
Wow. So Ken, can you tell us a little bit about your history prior to Ports America?
So I was NYPD. I came on the police department in 1981. And I spent my last almost 16 years in the Emergency Services Unit. I retired in November of 2002. I was running the command post reissue on 9/11 at Church and Vesey Street.
Wow.
And all the responding emergency service units reported to me. I gave them their assignments. We placed them on teams. Each team was outfitted in a similar fashion. They all had a supervisor with the same amount of offices. It was a model that we learned from FEMA. I was in Oklahoma City at the Oklahoma City bombing. And I was also at the first World Trade Center attack. At the first World Trade Center attack, it was a little more disorganized. We had teams that climbed the stairs more than once. Oklahoma City teams were very formal. We had an equal amount of personnel with a certain job responsibility, and then you had support teams, right? You had your teams that could do your electronic detection, your canine teams, your structural integrity teams. Those were the support teams. That's very similar to the finance, the IT, the engineering. So they were there. They knew what you were doing, but they were there to come in and support you if needed. And then, 9/11, when I was running the command post, that was my job. I was the senior person on the scene. That was my job. And we formulated teams and sent them into the towers. And then the South Tower collapsed. So we had a team that was trapped between the two towers. We were evacuating the teams in the North Tower. And then the North Tower collapsed. And then we changed our mobilization point to right off of Broadway. And then we reformed. By that time, we had all of the off-duty officers that had already been coming from home. We recalled the entire unit at the time. And then we started forming up teams again to go back into the pile. It was later in that evening where we found out about the Port Authority officers that were still alive. We worked on recovering the first one, finished that up about midnight, and then the second Port Authority officer was recovered alive about 7:30 that morning. On the 12th, I woke up on the 12th. My eyes were completely shut. I wasn't able to open them. Spent about an hour and a half at the Bayonne Hospital, flushing out my eyes, and then we went back down to the site. We continued work, and there was another Port Authority officer there who died, and we worked on extricating him. And then we just spent day after day down there until the site was cleared. In addition to that, we had the mayor's counter assault team. We had the election. We had the anthrax jobs. The anthrax was going on. So, just a side story. The cruise terminal in 92 and 94 were being set up to do a large tabletop exercise, a multi-agency a local, state, and federal disaster exercise on Pier 92 on 9/11. So when the event happened, there was actually some stuff in place to support this. So this became, the city had taken over, the mayor had taken over, at the time it was P&O Ports. The mayor had taken over P&O Ports' office. Pier 92 was and I have the flag that flew over the Joint Operations Center, was at Pier 92. Then when the anthrax job started, Pier 94 was designated as a temporary morgue. And when the anthrax job started, we responded out of here to all of the various powder, what we call powder jobs throughout the city. And we continued doing that, right through the end.
Wow.
It's impressive, Ken. I've heard some of your stories, and I really appreciate, kind of you sharing some stuff with us. It speaks a lot, right? Operations is, from the military, police, everything. It's a succinct thing, and if you do it right and it's efficient, it transcends, right? Cost follows it, synergies followed, as you mentioned before. Following good procedures, to your point, Mitch, obviously is the most important, and then adapting and evolving those procedures when you need to do, like we're doing now.
Right, but if you lose your ability to communicate in the middle of an emergency, it becomes logistically very difficult.
Yeah.
And that's true. And just to that point, at the time, not every officer had their own radio. So when the officers that were responding from home and those that were recalled, we would have teams of 8, 10 people on a team with only one radio. So you really weren't that effective.
Right.
We spent many, many days down at the pile looking for first responders that had gone missing. What happened? Did they fall in a hole? Did something happen? Did they just decide to go and get something to eat, get a cup of coffee?
Right, they didn't have a radio, they couldn't respond, right?
Exactly. So, one of the things that I tried to get a point across to everybody was a buddy system until we had our own radios. So if I know where Trevor is and Trevor knows where I am, if one of us aren't there, you just have to ask Trevor, where's Kenny? Kenny went to the restroom, he went to get water, etc. Until we get our own radios. And in one of the post 9/11 reports, we testified on various, was the 9/11 Commission. I testified for the 9/11 Commission as well as another group, the McKinsey report. And these are some of the things that came out of this were to have your own radio, communication, et cetera. And now every police officer does have their own radio. So you don't have that communication breakdown. For us on 9/11, a lot of my transmissions were recorded with dispatch, with the aviation, with the helicopters. A lot of them weren't. Some of them went through a repeater, some didn't go through a repeater. There was a little bit of a breakdown at some point, particularly after the first tower collapsed, but the system never completely went down. A lot of yelling on the radio, et cetera, as you could imagine. But yeah, communications, again, and within this organization as well, communications is the key. If something bad happens, we need to be in front of it as opposed to finding out about it, from somebody else.
Wow.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And I think, first and foremost, you're an absolute hero. And I think too, what was that?
I served with heroes. Those are the heroes.
And I think too, looking at all the uncertainty around the pandemic, I think too, just thinking about your history and thinking about kind of today, the position that you're in, there's nothing that you haven't seen, that allows you to adapt in where you are now, and to get through this, all the uncertainty around the pandemic.
Yeah, we will. We'll be okay. It'll be a phased in approach, but we'll do what needs to get done, to keep the workers safe, to keep the passengers safe, to get these ships out. I am looking forward to seeing that that first ship come back up the river again. This is our busiest time of the year, and
right now, Ken, there's nothing in port.
There is
cruise ship wise.
There isn't a cruise ship operating in the North America right now. There's only a couple of cruise ships operating in Europe. That's it. And
you said they're all in the Caribbean. Is that where they're being kept?
That's where they're being. A lot of them are being anchored.
Yeah.
Off of Florida and some off of the West Coast.
But aren't there like hurricanes in this time of year down in the
certainly are.
Okay.
You know, they'll pull anchor and they'll try to reposition it
Right.
to kind of get around the storm. But yeah, they are. They're out there rocking and rolling right now.
Oof, man. All right. Well, Trevor.
I mean, I think this was really, really great. I mean, I'm a little lost for words. My apologies. But I think for me personally, I appreciate you coming out today, Ken, and telling a little bit about your story and just kind of talking openly about operations, crews, finance, and kind of about you. It was really important. And, you know, I think we took a lot out of it. I'll speak for myself. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you
Taking
so much.
the time. All right. So I want to thank everybody for listening. Ken, I'm going to drop you off and we're going to wrap it up. And definitely, Trevor, keep us in touch and enjoy the rest of well, it's middle of the week. So
Middle of the week.
enjoy the rest of the week.
All right, guys. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Thank you.
All right, guys. So today ends this is our second round table discussion, right?
Yeah, I think the second one. Yeah.
Okay. So that was interesting. And Trevor, you're an operations guy, so I'm sure this was exciting for you. I'm not sure I completely understand their business model, but I certainly understand it more than when we started.
Yeah, I mean,
the whole thing. I just thought the city runs the ports and you just pull in and, you know, it's not like that.
Yeah. I mean, listen, it's always great to have someone with that kind of extensive knowledge and his background and history. And like I said before, he gets it. Like when I worked together with him, I was in the finance capacity. He taught me as much as I could possibly know. And we learned from each other. So it was really nice to have him part of this.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll be getting together again, I think in about 2 to 3 weeks. Don't know what the topic's going to be, but maybe Mike, that's on you. And we'll get another guest and we'll talk about business. Right, guys?
Sounds great.
Any final words? You just want to say goodbye? Okay.
Be well, everybody.
All right, guys. Enjoy the rest of the week.
Thank you for joining.
Thank
Take
you.
care.